One of my mentors taught, well, he used this example. He said, give an example, say that you're having a house party, right, at your home. And you have 100 people there, friends, family, everybody's having a great time, you're having a great time, everybody's eating and drinking and just, playing games, music. And then all of a sudden, a person that you don't like or an enemy of yours pulls up in front of your house, comes up, knocks on your door to come in your party. How would most of us react? Ęgbę, and welcome to another episode of Talking Ifá with me, Babalawo Salako. In today's episode, I wanted to talk about the topic, who are your real enemies and mine? So in thinking about that topic, what I want to cover today is some of the obvious enemies, that we all kind of know. But there are also enemies coming from other directions, say a spiritual direction and other directions. So I wanted to cover those today because a lot of times, especially in Ifá Divination, it may come up and say, you're having issues in your life because of enemies. And there are enemies in your life that are causing you problems, blocking your progress. And you're like, you want to know who those enemies are, right? So that's what I want to unveil today and find out who are those bad actors interfering with our progress. So with that being said, before I get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe so that we can reach as many people as possible. But definitely, please, in the comments, let us know where you're watching from. That really would help us, and we'd really appreciate it. So with that being said, let's talk. Greetings. I'm Babalawo Salako. I was initiated as a priest of Ifá and Obatala in Nigeria in 2006, and I've been practicing the Ifá Orisha religion for over 30 years now. My mission is simple: to help those who are new to the religion or lost in the religion. So if that's you, then buckle up and join me. This is Talking Ifá. So let's start off talking about our obvious enemies, those that most of us know about, we're used to. They're the first ones we think about when we talk about who are our enemies. So we think about this person that may be talking about us behind our back, slandering our reputation, especially accusing us of being something that we're not. And sometimes that can happen innocently, sometimes it's not. But say, for instance, you have something. Say, for instance, you bought a new home. Let's give this example, because this is a real life example I know about. So you have a person who is living in an apartment, say it's a couple, and they have all these friends, and the friends come to their apartment. They have get-togethers and all of that at their apartment. They hang out, everybody's cool, everything's all good. Then that couple goes and buys a home, right? They buy their first home, and say it was not a starter home. Say, they somehow came across a home that normally would take people a lot longer to get. Then all of a sudden they find that some of those same quote unquote friends start disappearing. They don't want to come visit to their house. I have an example where there were people that didn't come visit this house for 2 years. And they finally admitted later they were overcome with jealousy or envy, and they just couldn't come. They couldn't take seeing this person. That's kind of the crab in the barrel type enemy. They're cool with you when they believe you're on their level. But as soon as they think you're trying to get a little bit ahead of them, then that green-eyed monster comes awake, becomes the bad actor, and now all of a sudden they change. They may just change and just avoid you. Some people may go beyond that and try to degrade you or denigrate you. Another example, say for instance, you're on your job and you're working with someone and something happens and you have a misunderstanding. Say for instance, innocently, you do something that affects somebody else, but you did it out of ignorance. You didn't do it on purpose. You just didn't know that whatever you were doing, they were going to perceive it in this other way. They would get offended or they'd feel like you did something to them. And then you go and explain to that person just that. I didn't do that to you on purpose. My apologies. I wasn't aware. Then there's some other people there that then all of a sudden they say, no, that person's lying. They had to know. I know they knew. They're just trying to play dumb. They did it on purpose. So then they start going around you behind your back, trying to denigrate your reputation. They're telling everybody that you're a thief. You're trying to steal from somebody, and be careful around that person because they may try to steal your intellectual property or something like that. In that moment, that person has become acting as your enemy, right? Because you know that you didn't do that on purpose and you didn't purposely try to harm anybody else. It was an accident, but they don't believe you. They tell you you're lying. They call cap on you. And so now they feel it's their duty to go around and denigrate your reputation and that sort of stuff. These type of things happen. You could be a female that you're single, don't have any children, you have other friends or females that you hang out with and visit each other and do things together. Then you have a child or multiple children, and then there are some people that will get envious of you because they want children, they don't have them, you do, and then they get envious, right? And once they become envious, they can do some things that can be detrimental or harmful to you in terms of even, backbiting, talking about you behind your back, or just avoiding you, cutting you off. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So in our lives, one of the things that happens a lot, the root of it is envy. That causes a lot of people that are close to you to act as your enemy. Now, does that mean that everybody that acts as your enemy are your permanent enemies? Because sometimes it's temporary, right? Like say for instance, you're dealing with a person and you think they're your friend. They feel like you guys are on the same level. You do something like you get a better job or a business, you start making a lot more money than them, or you have children, or you acquire, buy a home. There's a lot of different things that can happen. And now they're feeling like they're behind you. And during that time that they're behind you, they can't handle it or deal with it. They become acting as your enemy during that time. Say if it's a child. But then say a year later, they have their own child. Now that envy that they had in them, that green-eyed monster, disappears, and now they want to be cool with you again. Now, of course, it's up to you whether you decide to allow that relationship to rekindle, but they may be cool with you moving forward, and you may say, okay, that's temporary, human nature. They became my enemy temporarily, but we were friends and we can be friends later. I just know that if our friendship is a little fragile, because anytime something gets out of balance, then all of a sudden this person can switch off on you. But, you're not obligated to have to deal with anybody except your family normally. And then even then you can limit, access. So that in general, those are the obvious enemies, people that you know who either try to block you, they don't want you to get a job promotion, or they don't want your business to succeed, or they're jealous of your family or whatever, that, or they are jealous of the attention you get and they don't get, etc. There's all kinds of things that could cause people around you who you think are friends to become enemies. Then there are enemies who are just straight up enemies from the get-go. They never were your friend, right? There are people all over that can do that. So in general, though, that's an example of enemies that are obvious.
Before we move on with the podcast, I want to tell you about something I know you're going to love. Discover Ashe Life. Get your high quality t-shirts and long sleeves featuring powerful Orisha designs like Oshun, Yemoja, Shango, and many more. They come available in multiple colors. These are comfortable fits made to wear every day. And this is more than just clothing. Ashe Life is about walking in blessings, embracing your path, and carrying that divine energy with you. So visit AsheLife.com today and wear your Ashe. From the family behind Talking Ifa, Ashe.
So now let's get to the next category of enemies. And those I would say, and now we're going to go into the spiritual realm. Those I would say I would call the Ajogun. So in the Yoruba tradition, the Ajogun, I will define in a minute, but the Ajogun make up the 200 plus one Irumule, or primordial entities that first came to Aiye, along with the 400 primordial entities that are on the right side. So the 200 primordial entities, the Ajogun, reside on the left side of the Ifá universe. On the right side of the Ifá universe are the 400 primordial entities, or the Orisha, that we call the Orisha. Altogether, there are 600 primordial entities that came to Aiye, according to Ifá. Okay, so who are the Ajogun? Well, the Ajogun, we start off with, there are 8 primary warlords out of the 200 primordial Ajogun. That being Iku, death. And Iku is the top one, or say the leader. So we go in this order. We say Iku, death. Arum, illness. Ofo, loss. Egbe, paralysis. Oran, trouble or big trouble. Ęgbę, curse. Ewan, imprisonment. And Ese, all other afflictions. So we get to the 8th one, that covers all of the rest of the total of 200 entities on the number 8 when we say all other afflictions. So these are the primary Ajogun. Now, out of the other ones, I didn't name all the other, out of the 200, there's a lot of other entities that make up the Ajogun. But we primarily look at those 8. So on the spiritual side, the Ajogun are kind of like obvious enemies for us, right? Of course, death is an enemy for all of us living on Aiye. Arun, illness, is an enemy for all of us most of the time. Now that one you can look at in several different ways. None of us like to be sick or ill. So we can say that is an enemy of our health. It's an enemy, our enemy. But at the same time, sometimes it is a siren or a warning or an alert system that we are doing something incorrectly with our health. Maybe we're not getting enough rest, we're not eating properly, we're stressed out too much all the time. There's a lot of different things that we could be doing that have negative effects on our health. So sometimes a wound or illness comes to alert us, hey, you need to get it together. You got some issues going on, you need to get yourself together and deal with your health, because we're in control of our health. So even though that's an ajogun and we say it's an enemy, if it's giving us a warning to help us improve our health, in that sense, that enemy is acting as an ally, right? Possibly even a friend for that moment. But again, we classify a wound as an illness, okay? Ofo, loss. Same thing with loss. Sometimes we're not moving right on our path. We're not doing things. We've had gains towards the good things we have stored in our ori, our potential destiny. We may achieve some of those things, and then we may turn around and lose them for different reasons, usually dealing with Iwa character, but we can lose things. But on the other hand, and we would look at that as negative, but on the other hand, if we're in a relationship that's a bad relationship with someone that we made a very poor choice in getting in a relationship with, and we shouldn't be in a relationship with, and if we lose them, would you look at that as a negative thing, right? That could be a blessing, that they got lost out of our lives. So even with loss, it can be an enemy, but in some situations, it could also be a blessing. Sometimes Ęgbę, paralysis, that sounds serious. If it has to do with physical, like you get in a car accident and you get paralyzed or something like that, that can be very negative. But sometimes when that comes up in Ifá Divination, it has to do with our progress in life towards developing our character, towards achieving those good things that we have in our ori. Sometimes we're standing still, we're stagnant. Our feet, our feet are not moving. We're not doing the work. We're not taking the actions we need to in life. So we're looked at as being stagnant. We're not moving, right? So we're in a form of paralysis. So sometimes when that comes up in divination, that's what it's talking about. And in that case, again, if that's the situation, that's not an enemy. Paralysis in that case is saying, hey, you need to get moving. You need to get up off your behind and get moving. You can achieve things, you can make things happen, but you have to make them happen. If you're just sitting there in one place, hoping that things happen, hoping things fall out of the sky, praying for things to happen for you, but you're not taking action, that's a form of paralysis, Ęgbę, okay? So very rarely, though, is big trouble or curse good for us. So these we look at as spiritual enemies, some of the main spiritual enemies who are always, the ajogun stands for warrior, who is always warring against humans and warring against the Orisha, okay? Their goal is to block your progress. Their goal is to bring pain and suffering to you, to us, right? In general. So therefore, they're classified in that category as an enemy or enemies. So let's get to the next category of enemies. And this one might kind of throw you off and be a little surprising. But before I get to that, let's talk about the ancestors, right? All of us have ancestors. And one of the core tenets of this spiritual tradition or religion of Ifá is the honoring and working with our ancestors, okay? So Some of our best allies in the spiritual world are our family, our ancestors, right? We can go to them at any time for help, especially when it's dealing with relationships or things with people. The ancestors are always there for us. We promote honoring our ancestors, especially our honored ancestors. So in Yoruba, the Egungun are our honored ancestors. So even in the other denominations like Lukumi, Candomblé, in honoring the ancestors, I know in terms of Lukumi, well, let me not say that. In one of the temples, the house that I used to be in, that was partially under the Cuban system and partially under traditional, they would do divination and ask which ancestors that they could call out by name. And you always wanted to call out an ancestor that you believed had good character. And so they would identify those that you could call out by name. That's one way of doing it. And then the others, you wouldn't do that. And the only ones you could put on your ancestor shrine or altar were those who you could call out by name, right? But in the traditional Isheshe or Yoruba tradition, they don't get into that part of doing that kind of work. They just honor the Egungun, and the Egungun already are only the group who are honored ancestors. Those are the ones that were able to go back to Orun and live forever, right? Have eternal life. They develop their character, they live good lives. I say good lives because they may have gone through reincarnation multiple times to develop their character. But once they did that, they reached the realm of the honored ancestors or Egungun. So therefore, in the Yoruba tradition, when you go to your Egungun and you honor them, you pray to them, you give offerings to them and ask for help, you already have a select group, you already have the honored, so you don't have to deal with trying to figure out who of your ancestors are actually honored ancestors. But again, traditions all over the world honor and work with their ancestors, and they do it in different ways. So I'm not saying there's only one way to do it. So I'm just talking about the way we do it in the traditional Yoruba, this traditional Yoruba religion and spiritual practice. We just say we go to the Egungun, but we're not saying that's the only way you can do it, right? So the ancestors are always there for us. They can help us, at least our honored ancestors anyway. But what would you say if I said there are instances when your ancestors can become your enemy? That's right. Your ancestors can become your enemy. Really. So in Ifá, in the Holy Odu of Egbe Aiye, Egbe on the right, Irete on the left, there's a story of just that, right? So in that case, a person was in a situation in which they found out, say a person went to divination and Egbe Aiye came up, and then the essay, a verse dealing with that was chanted, and that was revealed that applied to that client. Well, what it would be saying is your ancestors, not out of hate, not out of trying to bring harm to you, but out of love. See, love, the result of that sometimes can put people in the category of an enemy. So out of love, the ancestors started building a home in a room in heaven for that client. Say you were the client. They started building a home and a room for you. But because they miss you so much, they want to be with you out of love. But what does that really mean when it comes to dealing with you, a living person here on Aiye? So if someone in a room wants you to come in a room to be with them, you have to do what? You have to die. You have to be deceased to go to a room. So therefore, in that case, anytime somebody wants you to die or to kill you, then you classify them at that moment as being your enemy, right? If you go out on the street and somebody wants to shoot you and kill you, they're your enemy. Somebody wants to stab you, somebody wants to poison you, somebody wants to inflict an illness on you, you look at them as an enemy. So in that instance, your loved ones, your ancestors, are acting as your enemy because they want you to die to come be with them. But in that verse, Orunmila stepped in and says, no, you cannot have this person. I still have work to do with this person here on Aiye. So Orunmila went and tore down the house that your ancestors had built for you in a room or heaven. And Orunmila said that he was going to build a house for you here on Aiye so that you can stay and finish your work and achieve your goals and finish and arrive at the journey, the end, the destination of your path. So in that verse, the ancestors were acting as your enemy, even though in general, they're not your enemy. They're one of your biggest allies. So now let's go on to the next classification of who are your real enemies. Let's look at Egbe. Who are the Egbe? The Egbe are your friend group that you had in Orun before you were born and came to Aiye. So the way we believe it in this tradition is that when you're in Orun, you're a child or children, and you have playmates, just like here on earth you have children that you're friends and you run and you play. And sometimes in your play group they usually have the leader of the group, etc. And then one day you decide you're ready to grow up and go through the Iwatupwele test and come to Aiye, come to earth, be born, and grow up and go through that. You want to become an adult. So you do that. You come to Aiye, earth, and you're living your life. Then you start getting attacked spiritually. Now, a lot of times the Egbe come to us in our dreams at night. So you start having a bunch of nightmares and you're being attacked and you don't know where it's coming from. So you go get Ifá Divination, and then it's revealed that the Egbe are the source of those attacks and those bad dreams and nightmares that you're having, right? And you're wondering, well, wait a minute, they're my friends. I thought they wanted the best for me. They do. They are your friends. But like the example I gave earlier about the ancestors, the Egbe also love you. And there could be several reasons. One could be they just miss you and they want you to come back and be with them. Or you may have made some covenant with them or promised that you were going to do certain things for them, or you were going to honor them regularly, acknowledge them, give them offerings while you're here in Aiye, and then you're living your life through here and you totally neglect them and forgot about Egbe. You don't do anything for your Egbe. And they get angry and they want you to come back and be with them. Again, they're in a room. They're on the spiritual side. So what does that mean that they want you to come back? The exact same thing as it did with the ancestors. For you to go back to a room, you have to die, right? So again, anytime we have anyone who wants us to die or to kill us, we automatically look at them as an enemy. So in that instance, our Egbe may be acting as our enemy even though they're our close friends and allies the majority of the time. But if they get to the point where they say, okay, we want you to come back now, they start harassing you and haggling you and tormenting you, wanting bad things to happen to you so that you can go back and be with them in a room, then in that instance, even your Egbe are acting as your enemy at that time, in that moment, or in that case. Okay, so let's get to the final group or the final classification or category of enemies, okay? And this group or this category of enemy can be the one of the absolute worst of our possible enemies. And who is that? That enemy is yourself, myself, ourselves. Okay? All of the other category of enemies that I talked about are temporary, normally temporary or short-term enemies that could come up. You know, you can have a prolonged autoimmune illness. But the enemy that is with you and me 24/7, 365 is ourselves, right? We are normally our own worst enemy because a lot of these things that happen to us are because of us, choices we made, right? Eshu represents the crossroads because Eshu represents choices in life. We make choices in life. And a lot of times if we have our ruin or illness on us, it's because of bad choices we've made in our life. Sometimes when we have situations of people that are around us that are acting as our enemies, pretending to be friends, like say for instance, you got somebody around you and they turn you, lead you into being an alcoholic or drug addict or, blowing your money, not being responsible, blah, 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 encouraging you to do things about seeking pleasure. You're just a pleasure seeker, being narcissistic, where you don't care about nothing else or anybody else but yourself. Or, that's an example of things that we can do to ourselves. And we put ourselves in these bad situations. A lot of our situations we're in, there's examples of things that happen that's out of our control. You could get on a train or a bus and you're riding somewhere, minding your own business, and then that bus gets in a bad accident. That's, unless, of course you could get divinations and they may tell you didn't need to travel on that day or you need to do Ęgbę before you travel, etc. But other than that, we really don't have any control or very little control over those type of situations. But most of the time, the things that we do, we have some control over. We decide on who we're going to get in relationships with. So if we choose a bad partner and then we go through a bunch of bad situations, again, whose responsibility is that, right? Who was our true enemy in that case? The other person or ourselves, right? If we abuse our health and then bad things happen to us, whose fault is that? Who is our own worst enemy? Whether it's not eating right, smoking cigarettes, drinking too much, not getting enough sleep, that can happen. If we're full of stress all the time, if we're angry all the time, we getting into arguments and disagreements with people all the time. We control that. If we're overly emotional, right? A lot of us think that It's somebody else's fault all the time if something happens and we get all upset about it, right? And I'm not saying that they don't have a part to play, but one of my mentors taught, well, he used this example. He said, give an example, say that you're having a house party, right, at your home. And you have 100 people there, friends, family, everybody's having a great time, you're having a great time, everybody's eating and drinking and just, playing games, music. And then all of a sudden, a person that you don't like or an enemy of yours pulls up in front of your house, comes up, knocks on your door to come in your party. How would most of us react? Most of us would then, if that person come walking in the door in our party, if we don't go as far as just telling them to get out and causing a scene and kicking them out immediately, we're going to be stressed and we're going to get real upset. And then where's our focus going to go? Our focus is going to go totally on that person. We're going to ignore the other 100 guests, the friends that we're having a great time with. Our night is going to be ruined and our focus is on that one person. So what he taught was you have to be in control of your emotions. You can't, because there's all kinds of things that's going to happen to us daily. When we wake up in the morning, we go out in the world, there's crazy drivers that may cut us off. There's all kinds of things that's going to happen that can trigger our emotions, cause anger and stress. But he said, when you do that, you're allowing everyone else to be totally in control of you and your emotions. You have no control of your own emotions. All outside stimulus and entities have control of your emotions. He was teaching that you need to learn how to, you are in control of your emotions. If you get up in the morning and say, and you look in the mirror, I am going to be happy today. I'm going to have a good day. I'm going to be happy no matter what other people do. I'm not going to let them bother me. Okay, you have to get to that point. Otherwise, you're allowing everything around you that's going to happen to you during the day to pull you this way or that way. Your happiness, you may be happy only if you see a certain person or this, that, and that happens for you. If it doesn't happen for you or other things, you're going to get all upset or be depressed or sad. You're letting the outside world totally control you and control your emotions. So we all have to learn how to control our own emotions. That has to do with Iwa, that's character development. And the root of us not being our own worst enemy has to do with character, Iwa. At the root, we have to work on those things, suru, patience, right? Humility, good kindness and good thoughts towards others. Stay away from things like arrogance and selfishness and narcissism. These things all have their consequences, cause and effect, right? So at the end of the day, out of all of these groups, we can be our own worst enemies. So what am I saying in conclusion and wrapping this up? I covered obvious enemies that come up and outside people that try to do us wrong. I looked at the spiritual side in terms of the Ajogun, in terms of how the ancestors can sometimes be our enemies, how the Ęgbę can sometimes be our enemies. But in the vast majority of time, the ancestors in the Ęgbę are our friends, they're our allies, they're our supporters. But like I said, the one that can be our worst enemies is normally ourselves. We're normally our own worst enemies. That is who our real enemies are, okay? So I hope you got something out of this today. I hope this benefited you in some way, because that was my goal. And I thank you for your support. And if you want to reach out to me, I have my contact info in the description. You can reach out to me if you need guidance or assistance on anything or help, and I'd be glad to help you. So with that being said, I thank you very much for joining me today in this episode of Talking Ifá with me, Babalawo Salako. Ireo, o dabo.